My son sent me a box of handcrafted birthday chocolates. The next day he called and asked, "Dad, how are the chocolates?" I smiled and said, "Oh, I gave them to Miranda and the kids. They love sweets." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then he screamed, "What did you do?" His voice was shaking. His breathing stopped. At that moment, I didn't understand why Wesley was so panicked. I thought he was angry because I had shared his gift with others. How naive I was. That deafening silence was the sound of my son's murder plan crumbling, and my generous heart, the very trait he had always mocked, had unknowingly saved my life while putting my beloved grandchildren in mortal danger. My name is Preston Clark, and at 65 years old, I discovered that 42 years of unconditional love had raised a monster who wanted me dead. If this story shocks you as much as it shocked me, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and whether you've ever experienced family betrayal like this. But let me start from the beginning, from that quiet Tuesday morning in Phoenix when everything still seemed normal. After 40 years swinging hammers and managing construction crews across the Southwest, I'd earned these peaceful desert mornings. Started working construction right out of high school in 1978, back when Phoenix was still a small desert town and not the sprawling metropolis it is today. Worked my way up from carrying lumber to running entire commercial projects downtown. I remember those early days working 12-hour shifts in 115-degree heat, building the strip malls and office complexes that turned Phoenix into what it is now. My hands tell the story. Scars from sheet metal, calluses that never went away, a missing tip on my ring finger from a table saw accident in '89. But those hands built something. They built a $420,000 retirement nest egg, a paid-off house in Ahwatukee, and what I thought was a good life for my family. I was sitting on my back patio that Tuesday morning nursing my second cup of coffee and watching the desert sunrise paint South Mountain orange and purple. You don't get sunrises like that anywhere else, let me tell you. The saguaro cactus in my backyard stood like ancient sentinels, and the morning was so quiet you could hear the roadrunners chattering in the wash behind my property. At 65, after 4 decades of job site noise, hammers, saws, heavy machinery, this silence was pure gold. I was thinking about firing up the woodshop for another birdhouse project. Since retirement 3 years ago, I'd built maybe 50 of them for neighbors and the grandkids' school fundraisers. Kept my hands busy, A man needs to build things. It's in our nature. Sitting around watching TV all day would drive me crazy. The doorbell cut through the desert quiet just as I was mentally planning a fancy Victorian-style house for the red cardinals that visited my feeder. Now at 65, after all those years of early morning job site starts, you don't get many unexpected visitors. Most folks my age stick to planned visits. The delivery man, couldn't have been older than 25, probably working his way through ASU, handed me an elegant box wrapped in gold paper with a burgundy ribbon. FedEx overnight delivery, signature required. Someone had spent serious money shipping this thing. Inside were the most beautiful artisan chocolates I'd ever seen. Each piece looked like tiny artwork, some dusted with real gold flakes, others shaped like perfect roses and geometric designs that belonged in a museum, not my kitchen. The craftsmanship reminded me of the detailed finish work I used to do on high-end custom homes in Scottsdale. Precise, expensive, made by someone who really knew their trade. The card made my heart skip. To the best father in the world, with love, Wesley. I had to sit down at my kitchen table, just staring at those words. When was the last time my son had sent me anything? It had been months since he'd shown any real affection. Christmas had been awkward, stilted conversation over dinner at his house. Easter came and went without so much as a phone call. Ever since he married Miranda 6 years ago, our relationship had grown as distant as the mountains I could see from my patio. These chocolates were way too fancy for my simple tastes. I usually grabbed a Snickers from the Circle K if I wanted something sweet. Hell, my idea of fancy candy was the Russell Stover box they sold at Walgreens for Valentine's Day. These belonged in some upscale Scottsdale boutique where everything cost more than my monthly electric bill. Too good for just me, I said to my empty house, a habit I'd picked up since my wife passed 3 years ago. Talking to myself kept the silence from getting too heavy. Miranda and the kids would appreciate them more. My grandchildren, Ashley and Shane, were 12 and 10 with sweet teeth that could empty a candy store in about 5 minutes. They'd light up like Christmas morning seeing these chocolates. Maybe sharing Wesley's gift with his family would help bridge the gap that had grown between us. Maybe this was his way of reaching out, of trying to rebuild what we'd lost. Looking back, I should have known something was wrong. Wesley had never been the thoughtful gift type, not since he was maybe 8 years old. But I wanted to believe it was real, wanted to believe my son still cared about his old man. I rewrapped the box carefully, making sure the ribbon looked perfect. Drove my old Ford pickup through the newer subdivisions to Wesley's house in Ahwatukee, where every lawn looked magazine perfect even in the desert heat. My son had done well for himself, real estate agent specializing in luxury properties before the market went south. Nice house, beautiful family, the American dream I'd worked double shifts to make possible for him. Standing on his porch, I felt as nervous as a teenager asking a girl to prom. When was the last time I'd shown up unannounced? At Wesley's place, when had I last been welcomed with genuine warmth instead of polite tolerance? The kind of tolerance you show the insurance salesman who won't take no for an answer. The door opened, revealing Miranda, blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing one of those expensive workout outfits that cost more than I used to make in a week back in the 80s. Beautiful woman, no question about it, but she'd never really warmed up to me. Always polite, always proper, but never genuinely friendly. Like I was some rough-edged relic from Wesley's past that she had to tolerate for the sake of family harmony. "Preston," she said, and I caught something flickering across her face when she saw the wrapped box in my hands. Surprise, maybe? Or was that something closer to fear? "What brings you by?" "Wesley sent me these chocolates for my birthday," I explained, holding out the box like a peace offering. "Too fancy for an old construction guy like me. Thought the kids might enjoy them more than their grandpa fumbling around with artisan candy." I watched her face as she took the box, and for just a moment, something strange passed through her eyes. Definitely surprise, mixed with what I swear looked like confusion, like she wasn't expecting this at all. "How thoughtful," she said, but her voice sounded off, distracted. "I'm sure Ashley and Shane will love them. Now here's where I need to tell you something about Wesley that'll help you understand what happened next." My son had always been smart, maybe too smart for his own good. Graduated from Arizona State with a business degree, talked his way into real estate, right when the Phoenix market was booming in the early 2000s. For a few years there, he was making more money than I'd ever dreamed of. But when the housing crash hit in 2008, Wesley took it harder than most. See, he'd gotten used to the easy money, the big commissions, the lifestyle that came with selling million-dollar homes to California transplants. When that dried up, when the foreclosure signs started popping up like weeds across Phoenix, my son, well, he changed. Started making bad decisions, chasing quick fixes and get-rich-quick schemes, got involved with some questionable investment deals, borrowed against properties that were already underwater. I tried talking to him about it, offered to help however I could, but Wesley had developed this pride, this stubbornness that wouldn't let him admit when he needed help. The next morning started like any other Wednesday in my quiet neighborhood. I was up at 5:30, old habits from decades of construction work, sipping my first cup of coffee and watching the local news. Phoenix had hit 118 degrees the day before, another record breaker. The weatherman was promising more of the same. I was thinking about those chocolates, wondering if the kids had enjoyed them, when the phone rang at exactly 8:15. The caller ID showed Wesley's name, and my heart lifted like it always did when my son reached out. 2 days in a row, maybe those chocolates really had marked some kind of turning point in our relationship. "Morning, son," I answered, trying to keep the hope out of my voice. But the voice that came through the receiver was tight as a guitar string, strained in a way that immediately set off alarm bells in my head. This wasn't the voice of a man calling to chat with his father. This was the voice of a man in crisis. "Dad, about those chocolates I sent you yesterday." "Oh, they were beautiful, Wesley. Really thoughtful of you, son. Haven't seen craftsmanship like that since your mother used to drag me to those fancy shops in Old Town Scottsdale." "Did you—" His voice cracked slightly. "Did you eat any of them?" The question struck me as odd, but I chuckled anyway. "Well, no, actually. You know your old man. I took one look at those fancy pieces and thought they were too good for a guy who considers beef jerky a delicacy. Took them right over to Miranda and the kids instead. Figured they'd appreciate fine chocolate more than someone who thinks the peak of dessert is vanilla ice cream with Hershey's syrup." The silence that followed wasn't the comfortable pause of normal family conversation. It stretched on like the empty desert highways I used to drive between job sites, heavy and suffocating like the air before one of those rare Phoenix thunderstorms that shake the whole valley. I could hear my son breathing on the other end, quick and shallow, like he'd just run up a flight of stairs. In 42 years of being his father, through teenage meltdowns and college stress and career setbacks, I'd learned to read Wesley's moods through his voice. This wasn't anger or frustration. This was pure, undiluted panic. "Dad," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, like he was afraid someone might be listening. "What exactly did you do with them?" "I gave them to Miranda and the children, like I said. They love sweets, and those chocolates looked expensive enough to feed a small army. Figured they'd appreciate them more than—" "You gave them all to Miranda and the kids?" The panic in his voice was climbing now, reaching that pitch that reminded me of the time he was 8 years old and accidentally broke his mother's favorite vase, knowing he was in deep trouble but not sure how deep. Well, yes, the whole box. Why? My chest was starting to tighten, that old construction worker's instinct for danger kicking in. "Is there a problem, son?" That's when Wesley screamed, not raised his voice, not shouted, screamed like a man watching his entire world collapse in real time. "What did you do? What did you do?" I jerked the phone away from my ear, my hands starting to shake. In all those years of raising him, through every crisis and disappointment, I had never, and I mean never, heard my son sound like that. It was pure terror mixed with rage, desperation clawing at every syllable like a drowning man fighting for air. "Son, I don't understand. What's wrong? They were your gift to me. Weren't they? Did you eat any?" The questions came rapid fire now, like bullets from a machine gun. "Even one piece? Even a tiny bite? Are you absolutely, completely certain you didn't taste even one?" My heart was hammering against my ribs now. That old fight-or-flight response from my construction days when you heard the crane operator yell, "Look out!" and you had maybe 2 seconds to move or die. "Wesley, you're scaring the hell out of me here. Of course I'm certain. I never even opened the box properly, just admired the fancy packaging and took it straight to your house. What's going on?" And then my son said something that I'll remember until the day I die. "Dad, you have no idea what you've done." The line went dead. I sat there staring at the phone in my weathered hands, those same hands that had built half the strip malls in Phoenix, now shaking like leaves in a monsoon wind. My coffee was growing cold on the kitchen table, but I couldn't move, couldn't think straight. Outside, the morning sun was climbing over the mountains, painting everything in that harsh desert light, but inside my house, everything had gone dark. The way Wesley had asked about me eating those chocolates, the specific, desperate insistence that I hadn't tasted even one piece, the absolute terror when I'd confirmed giving them all away. Those weren't the questions of a disappointed gift giver. Those were the questions of someone who needed to know exactly where every single piece of chocolate had gone and why. Now let me tell you something about construction work that maybe you don't know. After 40 years on job sites, you develop this sixth sense about danger. You learn to read the signs when something's about to go very, very wrong. Maybe it's the way a crane operator sounds over the radio, or how a foreman's voice changes when he's spotted a safety violation that could kill somebody. You learn to trust that gut feeling because ignoring it can literally be a matter of life and death. That gut feeling was screaming at me now. I spent the rest of the morning pacing my living room like a caged animal, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I called Wesley back 3 times, straight to voicemail every time. I even tried calling Miranda, but their house phone just rang and rang. By noon, I was seriously considering driving over to their place when my phone finally rang again. I nearly knocked over my coffee mug lunging for it. "Preston." Miranda's voice was shaking, high-pitched with panic that made my blood turn to ice water. "The children are sick. We're at Phoenix Children's Hospital. You need to come now." I was moving before she finished the sentence, grabbing my keys with hands that felt like they belonged to someone else. What happened? They started vomiting about an hour after breakfast. Terrible stomach pains, couldn't keep anything down. "Preston," her voice broke completely now. "I think it's the chocolates. The drive to Phoenix Children's Hospital usually takes me about 25 minutes from my house, but I made it in 15. Probably breaking every traffic law in Maricopa County. My old Ford pickup wasn't built for speed, but I pushed that engine harder than I had since the day I bought it. Every red light felt like an eternity, every slow driver like a personal insult. My mind was racing faster than the truck. Wesley's panicked questions suddenly made horrible sense. Those chocolates weren't a gift, they were something else entirely. But what? And why would my own son send me something that could hurt his own children? Phoenix Children's emergency room was chaos, like emergency rooms always are. Crying kids, worried parents, the smell of antiseptic and fear. But I spotted Miranda immediately, huddled in a plastic chair that looked like it came from a school cafeteria. Her expensive workout clothes were wrinkled now, her usually perfect hair hanging loose around her face. When she looked up and saw me, her eyes were red-rimmed and terrified. "Where are they?" I asked, dropping into the chair beside her. "Treatment room 5. They won't let me back right now." She grabbed my arm with fingers that felt like ice, even in the Phoenix heat. "Preston, they ate the chocolates this morning right after breakfast. Ashley had 3 pieces. She said they were the most beautiful candy she'd ever seen. Shane had 2. Within an hour, both kids were doubled over with stomach pain. Hearing their names, my grandchildren's names, connected to this nightmare made everything real in a way that Wesley's panicked phone call hadn't. These weren't abstract concepts anymore. These were Ashley and Shane, the kids who called me Grandpa Pete, who spent weekends at my house building birdhouses and learning how to use a hammer properly. "How sick?" I managed to ask. Projectile vomiting, severe abdominal cramping, difficulty breathing. Each symptom fell from Miranda's lips like a hammer blow. The doctor started asking about everything they'd eaten in the last 24 hours, and when I mentioned the chocolates, she shuddered. They immediately started talking about toxicology tests. Toxicology. The word hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Not food poisoning, not some stomach bug. Toxicology. That meant poison. That meant someone had deliberately put something deadly into those beautiful, artisanal chocolates. Someone. My son. Wesley. We sat in that horrible waiting room silence, surrounded by the beep of medical equipment and the distant sound of children crying. I watched nurses hurry past, their faces professionally calm but urgent. Every minute felt like an hour. Every hour felt like a lifetime. I found myself thinking about Ashley and Shane, remembering last Christmas when they'd helped me hang lights on my house. Ashley had been so careful with the ornaments, treating each one like it was made of spun gold. Shane had insisted on testing every single string of lights twice, just like his Grandpa Pete had taught him. Measure twice. Cut once, I'd always told him. Good advice for construction, good advice for life. Now those same kids were fighting for their lives because of chocolates intended to kill their grandfather. Finally, after what felt like centuries, a young doctor approached us. His scrubs were wrinkled, his expression grim in that way doctors get when they have to deliver news that's going to change someone's life forever. "Mrs. Clark? I'm Dr. Drew Patterson. I have the test results." Miranda stood on legs that looked ready to buckle. "Are they going to be okay?" "They're stable now, but I need to ask you about these chocolates. Our toxicology tests show clear evidence of arsenic poisoning." Arsenic. The word hit me like a wrecking ball to the chest. Poison. In chocolates my own son had sent me for my birthday, not a gift, a murder weapon. Those beautiful artisanal pieces weren't meant to celebrate another year of my life. They were meant to end it. "Arsenic?" I managed to whisper, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. Dr. Patterson nodded grimly. A significant amount. If the children had consumed more pieces, or if they were smaller. He didn't need to finish that sentence. The implication hung in the air like smoke from a structure fire. I felt the hospital corridor tilt sideways, the fluorescent lights blurring into streaks. 40 years of construction work had taught me to stay calm in crisis situations. But this was different. This wasn't a beam falling or a crane malfunction. This was my own flesh and blood trying to murder me. "They were meant for you, weren't they, Preston?" Miranda's voice was quiet now, steady in that way people get when shock transforms into cold, hard understanding. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The truth was crushing my chest like a concrete slab, stealing every word I might have said. My son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, whose college I'd paid for with overtime shifts and weekend work, had tried to kill me. And in my generosity, the very trait he'd always mocked as weakness, I'd unknowingly saved my own life while putting my grandchildren in mortal danger. 3 sleepless nights gave me time to process the unthinkable truth. My son had tried to murder me. Now I needed to hear it from his own lips, needed the recording that would put him where he belonged. I knew exactly where to find him. Whenever Wesley faced trouble, failing grades in college, those early business setbacks, the first signs of his gambling problem that I'd been too blind to see, he'd always run to my sister Stephanie's house. She'd been his soft landing place for 40 years, the aunt who never said no, never asked hard questions. The recording device felt heavy in my jacket pocket as I drove to Stephanie's modest ranch home in Tempe, past the golf courses and strip malls I'd helped build in my younger days. Funny how different those familiar streets looked now, like I was seeing them through someone else's eyes. I knocked 3 times, firm and steady, the way I used to knock on job trailers when I had bad news to deliver. Guilt was written all over my sister's face before she even spoke. "Preston, I wasn't expecting you." "I bet you weren't." I could see Wesley's shadow behind her in the hallway. "We need to talk, Stephanie. All of us." Wesley appeared looking like he'd aged a decade in 3 days. Disheveled hair, wrinkled clothes that looked like he'd slept in them, but his expression showed no shame, just the calculating look of a cornered animal trying to figure out his next move. "Hello, Dad." Still trying to control the situation, still playing angles. I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. After 65 years on this earth and 40 of them spent dealing with difficult people on construction sites, I'd learned when to be polite and when to take charge. "Why did you try to poison me, son?" The lie came smooth as silk. "I don't know what you're talking about. Those chocolates were a birthday gift. Arsenic doesn't accidentally end up in artisan chocolates, Wesley. Your own children almost died because of what you put in there." His mask slipped then, just for a second, and I saw something cold and calculating underneath. "You can't prove anything. The police lab can prove plenty. Miranda's given her statement. The doctors have documented everything. And now—" I pulled out the recording device. "Now you're going to tell me the truth." That's when Wesley cracked completely. The pretense fell away like scaffolding from a finished building, revealing the rotten structure underneath. "You're a financial burden," he said, his voice flat and emotionless as a tax assessment. "You've always been a burden. I need your $420,000 now, not when you're 90 and drooling in some nursing home." Even expecting it, the words hit like sledgehammers. But I kept the recorder running. "I owe $95,000, Dad. Credit cards, private loans, some very unpleasant people who don't accept payment plans." He started pacing now, his real estate agent training taking over. "The housing market destroyed me. I lost 4 properties to foreclosure. My license is suspended. I'm drowning." Stephanie gasped from the doorway. "Wesley, stop. You can't mean this." He whirled on her with vicious precision. "Stay out of this, Aunt Stephanie. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, the kind of men I owe money to." But I understood perfectly. This wasn't my son speaking anymore. This was a desperate gambling addict who'd calculated my worth in dollars and decided I was worth more dead than alive. 42 years, I said quietly, keeping my voice steady for the recording. 42 years I raised you, loved you, sacrificed overtime and weekends to give you opportunities I never had. I never asked for those sacrifices, he shot back. I never asked for your blue-collar values, your construction worker mentality. I wanted more than hammering nails for a living. The room fell silent except for Stephanie's quiet sobbing in the corner. I looked at this man wearing my son's face and felt something die inside my chest. Not love for the boy he'd been, that would always remain, but hope for the man he'd become. "You're right about one thing," I said, standing to leave. "My son died a long time ago. You're just a stranger wearing his face." 6 months later, I walked up the steps of the Maricopa County Superior Court feeling like a completely different man than the one who'd received poisoned chocolates on his 65th birthday. Wesley, who'd tried to murder his father, was sentenced to 8 years in state prison, no possibility of parole for 6 years. As the bailiff led him away in handcuffs, he looked at me one last time. I saw no remorse, no recognition of what he'd destroyed, only sullen resentment that his plan had failed. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked how I felt about the verdict. I paused, thinking about Ashley and Shane, who were healthy and safe now. About Miranda, who'd become the daughter I'd never had. About the foundation I was planning to start for elderly victims of family financial abuse. "I feel like justice has been served," I said, "and now I can finally move forward with my life." That evening, watching the sunset paint the desert mountains purple and gold, I realized this story isn't just about poisoned chocolates or family betrayal. It's about learning that love without boundaries destroys both the giver and receiver. Don't wait until someone tries to kill you to discover your own worth. Real love demands respect. Real love includes accountability. Real love protects everyone involved. My grandchildren will grow up understanding that lesson because I finally learned it at 65. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no.